Rick Harrison, a cherished father figure and star of Pawn Stars, has the trust of Americans everywhere. A symbol of the American ideal, he stands tall. While working at the pawn shop, he won the hearts of many customers by showing them how to turn old items into treasures. What if, however, the glitter and shine were really covering up some horrible reality? Imagine, though, if the man the American people held in such high esteem was in fact a monster who lurked among us, hiding behind smiles and handshakes. Imagine for a second if the victim was his own daughter, a girl who has been silently hurting for years. At long last, she has spoken up. What she has to say could surprise the entire nation, and she is prepared to tell the court everything. When the doors of the courtroom were closed, what actually happened. How was it that no one noticed? Everything will be displayed here. Take caution. Rick Harrison stood tall under the bright lights of Las Vegas, where dreams are traded for money and power. He was a symbol with his incisive grin and insightful gaze. This pawn shop became famous all over the globe thanks to the reality show Pawn Stars. The show's beating heart was him. Together, they shaped the stereotype of the typical American family, loving, supportive, and full of humor. Corey, his brash but endearing son, helped them pull it off. Everything the Harrisons touched had a story to tell, so much so that people watched them like they were their own family. The most hidden truths can be easily concealed from prying eyes. Under the cover of darkness, away from prying eyes, a girl lived a life of solitude in their posh mansion. Rick adopted her during a charity event and she became his daughter. No one recognized her despite the assurances of a fresh start. Nothing was shown on television, no photos were shared, and no social media was used. In the home where her loved ones ought to have been, she felt as spectral as a ghost. However, she confessed to a terrible crime in the frigid courtroom of Clark County today. Her story could shatter the idyllic image of the Harrison Empire. It's more than just a story. Why was the public kept in the dark about what really happened behind closed doors? A weighty secret was about to be revealed at the tense Clark County District Court hearing. It was as if the air had been sucked out and compressed. As a witness, she went on the stand. She transformed from an ethereal presence to a blazing inferno, threatening to consume a kingdom built on deceit, rather than a mere ghost or specter in Rick Harrison's home. Until a young woman broke the silence, everyone remained silent. Her icy, otherworldly gaze peered through it. They took turns with me. With a steady but incisive tone, her voice sliced through the courtroom. The public's faith, the legal defense of Rick and Corey Harrison, and the reputational stronghold they had constructed were all rocked by those 5 words. Listening to her story was like entering the nightmare of a little girl who has lost her innocence, her faith in others, and her ability to speak up for herself. It pained my heart. At the age of 10, immediately following Rick's adoption of her from a large charity event, she confided in him in a terrifyingly open and honest manner. Into hell she was dragged. Under her breath she whispered, "He said it was family love," as she clung to the stand. But that wasn't the case. That was command. We were terrified. In her account, Rick's once adored smile transformed into something hideous whenever he was alone. So did Corey, the foster brother she had trusted to keep her safe. On the contrary, he collaborated with Rick and occasionally outdid Rick. They manipulated her thoughts in addition to her physical pain. According to what they told her, she would never be believed. Who, after all, would put their faith in a babysitter instead of a famous TV star? The courtroom fell silent at her words, but the prosecution's next piece of evidence was the real showstopper. As if cut by a knife, each fragment severed the lovely portrait of the Harrisons. Agents conducting their investigation into Rick's home discovered a hidden chamber in the basement which he had referred to as the treasure vault. However, behind biometric scanners and steel doors, they discovered dozens of highly encrypted hard drives. not gold or antiques. The arrival of digital forensic specialists who managed to crack them open shocked even the most seasoned agents. The creation date was labeled on each of the numerous folders. Included in these recordings were feeds from various rooms around the house, including the kitchen, hallways, and most unsettling of all, a hidden camera in her own bathroom mirror. Watching these movies won't make your house any safer. They were trained to follow her every move and maintain constant surveillance. In the place that ought to have been her sanctuary, her every move was documented as if she were a prey being pursued. But that wasn't all. On top of that, the hard drives had folders with dreadful names like Family Time. The prosecutor's voice was trembling with determination as she described the videos, footage of horrific crimes that corresponded precisely with the young woman's clandestine handwriting journals, which she had maintained for a period of 6 years. In her bedroom, beneath the floorboards, she found old, smudged notes that bore painful lines. On March 12th, Rick showed up. He then promised that Corey would follow. Despite my best efforts, he assured me that the house was soundproof. In his opinion, I was correct. There were no indications of fraud, according to experts in handwriting. Each page of that book was more than just a recollection. It was an unspoken cry for assistance that was at last acknowledged. Plus, the evidence just kept piquing my nerves. Emails and text messages recovered from Rick and Corey's phones were presented by the prosecutor. Rick texted Corey 2 days after making a note in the book saying, "She's acting out again. Perhaps it would help to remind her who her parents are." At 2:14 a.m., Corey sent a notice. Texts that merely read, "Your turn tonight." 2 men who were formerly held up as examples of American success were shot through the carefully constructed fronts. These were more than just messages. The entire courtroom trembled as a message was proclaimed aloud. To hear Rick's icy, terrifying voice say, "You're lucky to live here," was more than just a threat. "You would be considered system trash if I weren't there." It was a sign of his strength and a warning that his fame would shield him from anyone who dared to challenge it. In reality, though, there was more going on. The family's former housekeeper, Gloria Mendoza, testified while visibly distraught. Rick was standing shirtless on the girl's bed when she walked in, and it was a terrifying sight, she said. Her expression betrayed her indecision. Gloria found it difficult to control her tears. And his eyes. He looked like he wanted to kill me for seeing something I shouldn't have. She resigned the very same day, but she has been mum about it all this time out of fear of Rick's influence. Everyone in the courtroom went silent when delivery man Brett Cummings arrived with evidence that shocked them all. His phone inadvertently recorded a desperate girl's voice through the house's walls. You could barely make out her one-word request, "Please, not again." Though brief, the sound shattered the silence of the room. Perhaps the most surprising item they uncovered was a letter stashed away in an old desk in Rick's storage room. His dad, Richard Benjamin Harrison, wrote it all by hand. "Everyone loves Richard, the elderly man who works at Pawn Stars." No specific recipient was mentioned in the letter. He composed the following: "There's something sick in this house. To whoever finds this letter," was the only message on the note. "I can't cope with this. If I kept my distance for too long, I ask for your forgiveness." These were profoundly meaningful. They revealed the evil that had been brewing in the Harrison family for years, unspoken by anyone, and served as a haunting last statement. Despite everything, the young woman maintained her strength. She spoke nonstop for 4 hours without pausing. Their vicious mistreatment were difficult for her to describe as family love. She described how she would pretend to die in bed at night in order to escape. She turned to the panel of judges and proclaimed, "They took everything. They didn't take my voice, though, and now I'm using it." Those things weren't merely proof, that was its exact wording. Her responsibility had been absolved. Strong was the woman she was. Sitting at the defendant's table, Rick shook uncontrollably and lowered his head. Because his face was flushed with rage, Corey appeared as though he was going to explode. Still, the woman whose gaze they had just averted remained fixed in their minds. Her gaze today was the focal point of attention. There was more to the case than just a blown case. Additionally, it reached other regions. Social media went absolutely bonkers when word of her story got out. Her remarks were rehashed endlessly on news programs. One statement stuck with me because it conveyed some long-forgotten truth. They took turns with me. Rick and Corey Harrison were once beloved, but their true colors were now visible to all. Although Corey Harrison was now repulsed by them, the young woman's motivation was not vengeance, but rather the desire for independence. All of the Harrison empire was about to collapse as the invisible cage that had restrained her was shattered. No amount of water could quench the raging inferno that her story had kindled. All the carefully constructed illusions about the Harrison family were engulfed in flames. Truth and lies were laid bare in Clark County Court, which had transformed into more than just a decision-making venue. A television dynasty crumbled before the eyes of a shocked global audience. When the emaciated and enraged Corey Harrison took the stand, the jury fell silent. In the hopes that a response would salvage his tarnished reputation, everyone held their breath. What transpired, however, was the total breakdown of a family that had been held up as an American ideal, not merely a man. Unlike when he was more comfortable, Corey now appeared to be in a precarious situation when he was on Pawn Stars. The lawyer was so aggressive and relentless that he was gasping for air. "Are you saying you didn't help abuse your adopted sister? What is it?" she inquired, her voice icy and unfeeling. Corey's jaw clenched. "Certainly. Someone with malicious intent has made these accusations in an effort to harm my family." The self-assurance he displayed on television had crumbled into something feeble, and his voice was quivering. A page from Corey's journal, discovered in his home, was produced by the lawyer. "My job is terrible, and I feel like we went too far. I see her face in my dreams, but I don't experience any emotions. I'm worried that she will reveal it." All the air in the room seemed to have been expelled. Screaming, "That wasn't me!" Corey's face flushed red. "You are changing the game. It's insane." All the time she deceives and tells fibs. Her life was improved beyond anything she could have imagined because of us. Out of desperation, he forced a confession, which was more than just a denial. Whispers and gasps resounded throughout the courtroom. Even though Corey's voice was quivering, he persisted in speaking as the judge slammed the gavel to halt the proceedings. "You people don't know anything about my family. She shattered everything." She isn't appreciative. He was already in a precarious situation with his father when his breakdown did nothing to help. While seated at the defendant's table, Rick Harrison did not budge an inch. The former head of a massive media conglomerate now sat slumped over, trembling, and gripping the table edge with trembling hands. Rather than using silence as a tactic, he took it as a sign that his brain was entirely dysfunctional. While incarcerated in Clark County Jail, Rick's star power faded. In his icy concrete cell, illuminated by harsh electric lights that gave credence to his nightmares, he was merely another prisoner. According to prison officials, Rick refused to eat and would stare at the cement wall for long periods of time, muttering something about voices he believed he heard, such as the jeers of crowds and the insults of enemies he couldn't see. In the midst of a paranoid episode, he screamed at a security guard, "They lie! The money talks. They intend to cause me harm." However, nobody responded. In prison, his notoriety was of no consequence. This is because another inmate, who was aware of Rick's transgressions, dared to threaten to isolate him in the yard if he was not restrained. At the moment, Rick is living alone and is troubled by the fact that he can't escape his own footsteps and the reality that he can't change his situation. Court battles and prison time weren't the only things that drove a wedge between the Harrison family. Everything that had been holding them together before was shattered as it shook the ground like an earthquake. Adam, who has been relatively low-key for some time, is half-brother Corey. He publicly ended their relationship, which was a shocking move. He expressed regret. "What's come to light disgusts and breaks my heart. I haven't had a conversation with Rick or Corey in over 7 years. My decision to leave was rational, and I now see it clearly. The victim's plight breaks my heart. The last slash." His words severed the tenuous family ties that remained. Joanne Harrison, who is Rick's mother, remained silent. She refused to speak with reporters or appear in court. According to a trusted acquaintance, she confided in them, saying, "I knew something wasn't right, but I was too afraid to face it." Because of her relative's silence, many assumed she was guilty. An atmosphere of intimidation and control was laid bare when former employees of the Harrison family began to come forward.